we know how the other end, the toxic masculine, can impact future generations. How do you say toxic femininity impacts future generations for women or people who identify as women?
Almost the same.
Yeah.
I think it keeps the cycle of abuse going, to be honest. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sex Positivity Unfiltered, where we talk about sex and we are not polite about it. My name is Lyndsey Murray.
And I'm Denise Stratton.
And today we are talking about toxic femininity. Now, something kind of a disclaimer I want to give before we dive into this topic and kind of where this idea sparked from. So a while back, we had released an episode about toxic masculinity. And one of the comments we got was, well, hey, are you now going to talk about toxic femininity? At the time, I had commented back like, no, we're not going to do that. And the reason why is because it definitely came with this tone. I think you would agree. It had this tone of like, well, you're talking shit about the men. When are you going to talk shit about the women? It was like a very like tit for tat.
Which is interesting because we weren't talking shit about men at all.
We were not talking shit about men at all. We were talking about the concept of toxic masculinity. I think that's the issue. Like when I hear toxic femininity, I immediately kind of have a reaction, like I want to fight kind of reaction, because I think it depends on who it's coming from. Like if it's coming from, let's say like the alt-right.
They uses feminism as a slur. Yes.
They do. They use it as a slur and they use it like as a defense. It's coming from a place of like, I'm mad that you're talking about men. So what about the fucking women too? And they get like, they're kind of like angry about it. And it's like this rebuttal, like, well, if we're going to talk about this, we better be talking about what women do. I just want to make it very clear that when we dive into this topic, we're not going to be talking shit about women, just like we weren't talking shit about men in our toxic masculinity episode. We very much touched on not only are women harmed from it, but men are harmed from toxic masculinity too.
I think we started that podcast off by saying, we love men.
We did. Like we're trying to respect you. We're trying to say if you have toxic masculine traits, like it comes from being part of a patriarchal culture and how that really is harmful to you too. And so that's how we started it. And I think people who comment like that didn't even listen at all to the episode. They saw the title, got upset, and was like, well, what about the women? What about what women are doing? And I'm like, we're not going to do that. But yeah, here we are. We're talking about toxic femininity. And so we're going to get into what that actually is.
Yeah.
But I just have to clarify, it's not, hey, we're talking trash about one group and now we're going to talk trash about the next. That's not at all what we're doing. And so hopefully people who are listening can recognize that. So the 3 questions we're hoping to answer in this episode is 1, what is toxic femininity? Question 2 is how is it different than feminism? And 3 is how does this impact future generations? So Denise, I want to hear from you. What's your definition of toxic femininity?
Oh, man. Okay, so I put in Google basically what is toxic femininity. And basically it came up with toxic femininity, but it also gave me toxic feminism. So it was hard to sort through those articles because they are very different things. But they were kind of grouped together, which was interesting. So toxic femininity is defined as the behavior that reflects or supports gender-based stereotypes or social norms for women. So whenever I think of toxic femininity, I'm thinking very purity culture type thing. Also, beauty standards are a must. I'm thinking just the concept that women are emotional beings and we depend on our emotional feelings in order to make decisions. I think of it also leading into like internalized misogyny.
That's the simple definition. Is internalized misogyny, honestly. I think it's a way to keep women boxed in. Like, this is what a woman is, and you have to, like, live up to that standard. And there's a judgment otherwise. That, to me, is what toxic femininity is. Like, the example I think of is criticism over women who don't shave their armpits or legs. It's like, you're a woman, you should shave. Like, that's what's feminism. That's a very maybe small micro example, but that is what I think of, right? Like toxic femininity is, here's what women do. If you're not doing that, well, you're not really a woman. You're not playing by the rules. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. There's going to be judgment. There's going to be criticism. Very internalized
No,
misogyny.
I get when you say you're not playing by the rules or that it's in your box, right? Like those are the two takeaways that I get the most from this. And I see the parallel with toxic masculinity. Like I
Boys don't cry.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly what that is.
Toxic masculinity is putting them in a box that this is what a man is and this is what you have to abide by in order to be a man. And same thing with toxic femininity. These are the rules you abide by. This is what society tells you you have to do in order to be a woman, right? And unfortunately, especially from a very non-feminine like me, though that box is really hard to follow. Like those rules are hard to follow. Yeah, it's hard to fit into that box. I don't fit into that box.
And a lot of people don't. And the quote that I read, and this comes from, I believe, Very Well Mind, which is a site that I got this from. But it says toxic femininity in the same way of toxic masculinity. It refers to the adherence to the gender binary in order to receive conditional value in a patriarchal society. That's kind of the perfect way to put it, right? Yeah. It's like, if you do these things, you'll have more value. You'll be seen more positively. You'll get more of what you want if you do these things, right? Yeah. This is where I place my value, and there comes consequence to that.
Yeah, because in society, it seems like a woman's value, at least from what I grew up learning, was your looks. Like that's how you're going to attract a man, is you have to, men like shiny things is what we're taught, right? So you have to look really nice because that's how you attract them. And another thing is to be a good homemaker. So you have to be able to, cook really well. You have to be able to keep the house clean for him. You have to be able to take care of your children. Like those are the jobs and responsibilities we have as women, is to be a support system for our man. To make sure that he has something pretty to look at, so that way he doesn't go elsewhere, and to make sure that we're the best mom ever, because that's the main job we're told we should have. Yeah. Right. And yeah, like I said, very limiting.
And what it's not. So that's kind of maybe we didn't include this question, but I was thinking as I was looking into this topic, like what toxic femininity is not. And the example I have for that is, you might hear people say women are overly emotional is like an example, right? And I've heard that example be used as like, that's a toxic trait. Like you're overly emotional. That seems manipulative. You gossip too much. Like, oh, women gossip so much, right? And people will view that as like a negative trait. But those traits are not inherently only in women. Like men do the same thing.
Oh yes.
So when that's an example of like, oh, that's toxic, that's not what we're talking about. That's not the angle we're coming from, I don't think. Because what's wrong with being emotional? What's wrong with gossiping with your friend? It's different, right? It's not I guess what I'm trying to say overall is that the toxicity we're talking about does not stem from the stereotypes that women get that are not really that harmful, such as like being overly emotional. Yeah. That's not a toxic feminine trait. That's just a trait that some people have, and it makes some people uncomfortable.
One thing that I learned while researching this, I don't remember which YouTuber it was, but I watched the YouTube video. It was a therapist who was talking about toxic femininity. And one thing she said is that she doesn't like the fact that we're gendering toxicity, yes, right? She doesn't like the term toxic masculinity, toxic femininity. While those terms are valid and but what we should be talking about is just toxicity. Like toxicity is genderless. Yeah. And there are traits that, might be stereotypical to a masculine or a feminine nature. But for the most part, those toxic traits can go to either side of that spectrum, right? It's not gendered at all. There are very much men, just like, okay, when we think about toxic masculinity, what we're thinking about is you don't show any emotion, right? So, and that can be, a woman can very much fall into that as well.
Yeah, there's just the bigger picture where like men tend to fall more in that category, but it doesn't absolve women from also having that trait. Exactly. They could, which kind of leads into, and I might be jumping ahead here a bit, but why toxic femininity is different than feminism, okay? Yeah. Because again, like I said earlier in my disclaimer, like it's not tit for tat. It's not, if we're talking about toxic masculinity, it doesn't mean we're saying men are bad and women are good, because true feminism does not absolve women of personal accountability.
Damn right.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? Women can make mistakes too. Women can be toxic as well.
Yep.
Women can be harmful.
Yep.
And like an example of that, and I would say this is toxicity, and stems in the form of like femininity. But there are examples where women really want to get the attention of a man, which is fine. But women will be vindictive and harm other women to get the attention of a man, to be with a man. It's like there's competition, right? Like if you and I both like someone, I'm going to put you down and hurt you so I have a better chance with this person. Like that can happen. That I would say is toxic.
I agree.
Right?
Okay.
And so like as an example. So that's the big difference, is that true feminism doesn't mean women are just better and never do anything wrong, because that's not true.
Yeah.
We know that's not true.
No,
and that's not what we're saying.
I definitely, so I want to define feminism for our crowd, just so since we're talking about it. So feminism, just in general, is a movement and ideology that advocates for the equality of sexes and works to address and eliminate gender-based inequalities and discrimination. So literally the exact opposite of what the term toxic femininity is. Like literally, I mean, this is the feminism is trying to fight that. Like they're it seems, at least from the definition point of view, they seem like polar opposites, right? However, and I'm just going to point this out there, just like any extreme, we don't think masculinity is bad, but whenever you get into an extreme, right, and so when it kind of becomes toxic. Same thing with femininity, same thing with feminism. So there's this section of feminism that can be toxic, and that's kind of what the stereotype goes through. I've honestly never met someone who is this extreme, but I know this is the stereotype we get whenever we coin feminism, and it's pretty much, you know, the man haters, right? They hate man. They think that all men are just inherently oppressive, or that they state that women are just superior to men, and they also promote like discrimination against men. Like they want to exclude men's voices completely. Yeah. So I'm going to be transparent and say that I do believe people like that do exist. I've never met someone like that yet, but I'm assuming. But unfortunately that's the stereotype feminism as a whole gets. And I want to break that down.
And I think what it is that to a point, there are some men's voices who I do not want to be at the table. Like we did the reaction video to, you know, Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah.
When a man is speaking in a way that is disgusting and degrading to women, I don't fucking care about your voice at all. Like you specifically can fuck off. Yeah, so there's that, right? Like there's that. But then when you say that, the response you'll get is like, well, see, you're talking shit about men. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm talking about this specific message that is harmful and can quite literally be violent to women. That's what I'm talking about. I don't want that voice at the table. But I think like people who get really, they're like, see, here's another feminist just shooting down men. I'm like, I'm not shooting down men. I'm shooting down messages that are harmful to other people that happen to be coming from men. Like my shoot down of toxic masculinity does not mean that I hate men.
Yeah.
But there's a limit, right? There are people out there who they might hate all men. Yeah. All men are trash. Usually when I hear a message like that, if someone is saying that, they have some healing to go through, right? There's something, like things have happened to them, which I almost feel like, unfortunately, is a universal female experience of harm by men. Like most of us have at some point experienced harm in some way. But if you think like every man is trash and you don't want to talk to any man, you don't want any men in your life, that's kind of sad to me. Because there are examples of men who can be really great, really supportive, really mature, really respectful. They're out there. But, you know, if you're not open to that, I just assume something has happened that you're holding on to.
I see it a lot in my culture. So I'll see like these depictions in the media of this man-hating lesbian, right? So I feel like it's my community that gets that. And I'm not saying that people like that don't exist, because I know they do, because I've seen it in my lesbian groups. I've seen the exclusionary ideology when it comes to like the male species, right? So I've seen it. I know it exists. I've never met anyone like that, but I know that they're out there. So I do want to I just wanted to give space to acknowledge that there are people who do take feminism to a toxic point as well, just like anything can be. But for the most part, no, feminism, and that's why I wanted to break it down. Feminism is literally just the idea that everyone should be equal. Like, to me, that's beautiful. I don't see why most people don't consider themselves feminists, because that just means that we all just want to be on the same playing field.
And some men, and again, I blame this on the patriarchy, but some men think that they, and maybe part of this is true, but they think that they benefit from women's oppression, honestly, right? If women become equal, something's going to be taken away from them. There was a video I saw, and I this was like a random TikTok. I could not tell you who said it or what the deal was, but there was like, it was this guy talking, and I guess there was maybe affirmative action at his company, and so they're trying to have a diverse leadership. Right. So they're making it a point to, we don't just want to have old white men getting the promotions. We want to have people of color. We want to have women. We want to diversify. Yeah. Of course, some of the maybe old white men were saying like, this person took my job. This woman took my job, or this whatever took my job. And the guy who's talking was like, I want to break down the word my. Like, why is it your job?
Oh, accurate.
It's not your job. It's a job that you felt entitled to get that now a woman has, or now a black man has, and not you. Like something like that, right? But even the word, like, you'll hear that. And that's, again, rooted in toxicity. It's like, if women stay down here, I'll keep getting my promotions. And that's how the world should be. When women start becoming equal, it's upsetting to them. Because it's like, well, I benefit from continuing to being promoted, and women should just have secretary jobs or whatever, right?
They use the excuse that they don't want people who are unqualified in these positions. And I'm seeing it a lot right now, especially in the pilot industry. I don't know if you've been seeing it lately.
Oh my God, Candace Owens being like, my God. I would be terrified if a woman was the pilot. And I'm like, why does being a woman make you unqualified? They've gone through the same training that their male colleagues have gone through. That's the issue, right? Is like, if someone is genuinely unqualified, like if you're looking at, a male candidate and a female candidate, and the male candidate has 20 years of experience and the female candidate has no experience, then it makes sense to hire the man, right? Yeah. But if you're talking about someone who is qualified, but they happen to be a woman, and it's like, well, I don't want an unqualified person to take. Why does that make them unqualified?
You know how many certifications you have to get in order to be a pilot?
And how much money you have to spend to be a pilot. It's like $200,000. It's inexpensive. A lot of debt. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of training. But yeah, hearing Candace Owens, who I cannot stand. I am not a fan of hers at all. But her being like, I'd be terrified if there was a woman pilot. I'm like, why? Explain it to me. And I bet you she can't really explain it.
Yeah, agreed.
They can't give a valid reason. So yeah, in an ideal world, like, why wouldn't people want to be equal? It's because some people benefit from not being equal.
Well, we just did an episode about religious trauma, right? A couple episodes back. And one thing that I took away from that was that there are societies and communities in our day and age right now that do believe that there are different social classes, and that men are at the top tier of the social class and women are below them and should be a supporting role. And those are actual beliefs that people actually do have. They've grown up this way. This is their programming. Like, this is what they believe to be true, just, and godly. Right? So that's kind of, I feel like that's...
Well, and that's one of the traits here of like traits that are expected of women in a toxic feminine environment. It's the belief that women should be submissive. Like, if that's the belief, like that's how it has to be, that's the problem. I mean, it's definitely an intersection of like even talking about sex, but you always have a choice. It's all about autonomy. It's all about individualism. It's like, if I want to be submissive, meaning I don't want to work anymore. I want my husband to take care of the household. That's what I want because of whatever reasons. Like, that's fine. That's your choice. I think it's the deep-rooted belief of like, this is how things should be for every household. And women who work and don't stay home with their kids, what is wrong with them?
Shame.
It's the shame of it. Yeah, that's the issue. So it's like, I don't want anyone to ever think that we're trying to say women should always be at work and independence and all that. I mean, if that's your choice, yes. If it's your choice to stay home with the kids, that's also valid. Like, it's all about the choice. But there are a lot of households where that's not the choice.
No.
That is just how it should be. That's the belief. And that's the system we're going to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else is wrong.
Yep.
I would say that's toxic.
So when you were growing up and you were learning how to be an adult and coming up and finding yourself, did you fit into that femininity box, or did you ever feel times where you were trying to being pushed into a box and you didn't fit in? Like,
no, I don't think I was ever pushed into that box. My mom always worked. I mean, I think she had a period of time where she didn't when my brother and I were really little, but she's always worked, and I've always worked, and I've always wanted to work. Okay. And even in my marriage now, not that I don't trust Andrew, I would if today I was like, I don't want to work anymore, and I had my reasons, I know we would work together and we would make it happen, but I just don't want to. Okay, yeah. I really do like working. Yeah. So yeah. I like making money. I like learning. I like growing. I like expanding. And
have you ever had pushbacks from like friends, loved members, society of the fact that you work, or even I don't know how comfortable you are saying that you are the breadwinner in your relationships? Or?
Yeah, I do make more money. So I've never had any negative feedback about that, but I think it's because of who I surround myself with. Okay. Like, I definitely, all of my friends are very progressive in that way, and so is my husband too. I don't there's never been any qualms about me making more money because it's our money. Like, we're married, I share it with him because he does the same with me, and like, we're making a life together from it. Partners, yeah, we're partners, so it's never really been an issue. And yeah, my friends and my family, people I surround myself with, don't really have that traditional view, which I'm glad. I'm lucky for that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I same thing. I surround myself with people who don't necessarily they have very unconventional lifestyles. Yeah. So it's always been something that, you go to the beat of your drum and we're happy and we support you for it. But I have seen, like, whenever I'm around, like, I don't know, family members who are more conservative, and there is that cookie cutter lifestyle, right? And if you fall outside of this, and well, you're the weird kid, or maybe you're just I'm going to use this word again, and I don't mean to, but that's what I've been you're ungodly. Like, there's certain things, certain actions and ways the world goes, and if you're not a stay-at-home mom, or you're not focused on trying to have a kid or trying to build a family or trying to get a husband, that's a big one, especially when we're younger. Like, the idea of women have to get a husband very young is to me, a very toxic femininity trait.
Well, it is. And I have family, like extended family in Oklahoma who is kind of like that. Okay. Like, I have a cousin that got married really young and is divorced and remarried now, but got married really young. And it was from pressure from her mom. Yeah. She didn't want to. She did not want to. Like, even leading up to the wedding day, she was like, my gut is telling me I don't want to do this. I'm 20 years old. Oh my God. And it's just like so young, and he was in the military, and it was like, it's the right thing to do. You can't break it off with him because he's fighting for America. And he did go to war and then came back, and they got married. And there was like this pressure, like, you can't do this to him. You have to marry him. Oh no. And so she did. And they're both like great people. Like, he's a great guy, but it wasn't right, you know? And of course they're divorced now. But even like, I have family, like on that side of my family, that even going to college is seen as like unnecessary. Yeah. It's seen as unnecessary. It's like, why would you want to move away and go to school? Like, what a waste of time. What a waste of money. Get a job here, live next door to your parents, build a family, and it'll be great.
You're going to intimidate the men around you too.
Yeah, because, men want a woman who has family values, and going to college is kind of anti that, like, in their view. Yeah. So, yeah, even going to college is kind of seen as like, why would you want to move away from home? Like, you shouldn't do that.
You are okay. So you are a very feminist looking, like, and that's one thing that drew me to you whenever, especially when we're starting this podcast. I've never heard the word patriarchy more than when I met Lyndsey, right? And I do love that about you. Has anyone ever told you that you were intimidating?
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
To me, that's a concept where, like, you wouldn't say that to a man. Like, if anything, like literally the same things that you do that I find very admiring, and the many businesses that you go into, the fact that you're a go-getter, that you speak your voice, that, like, these are qualities that I find extremely admirable. If you had a penis, we would have no problem with it. You'd be a leader in society.
And that's kind of what we want men to be.
Yes.
So it would be almost like valued and looked up to. And I've heard I'm intimidating many, many, many times.
Oh, same girl.
But which is weird because I don't really think I'm that intimidating of a person. Like, I'm very welcoming and open and kind. And like, if I were just to describe my personality, I would never describe myself as intimidating. I think it's just because, you know, I'm smart and motivated and have things going for me. That is the intimidation. And it's like, men don't really, I do think like men in the past have been kind of turned off by that because they do want a woman that they can lead. And I've never been that kind of person.
Oh, so you have experienced it with men also feeling it.
Yeah, they've never like said like, you've got too much going for you and I want a woman that doesn't have so much going for her. They've never said it in that way, but that's what they've meant.
Yeah.
That makes any sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because when I usually see like you're intimidating, I usually hear it being spoken from a woman, which always like boggled my mind because to me, I'm like, you know, as the women, I feel that we should, you know, lift each other up. We should want each other to be go-getter, make our own money, be that independent, strong woman that we want to be, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, there's always that catch-22 that women, especially women, get where yes, you want to be that independent woman, but you also don't want to be so strong, which drives me insane that we're teaching women this. You don't want to be so strong that you're pushing men away.
Yeah.
And I hate that paradox. I see it mostly, I'm speaking on behalf of my best friend. I see that with her. She has her own house, she makes her own money, and she's gone through issues where when dating a guy, she wanted to get another job because she wanted extra money, and he's like, no, you don't need to do that. Let me pay your bills. And to me, as someone who is independent, I do get pride from being able to spend my own money. So I understood that portion of her, but the guys didn't understand because they just think, you know, I'm not enough.
They see it as like, why are you not letting me take care of you?
There you go.
But I want you to take care of me in other ways. I want to have my career. I want to have my own money. I want to have my own car. I want to have there's a sense of security you get from knowing I can get my own stuff that I need. I want you to take care of me in other ways, like be there for me emotionally, right? Take me on a date. Get to know me.
If I'm sick, make me soup.
Yeah, be there for me when I'm at my low point. Like, let me lean on you. There's other ways that I can do that. But again, if you're dating a man who is not emotionally vulnerable, the only way they know how to take care of you is financially. And so then if you don't let them do that, men can easily be like, well, now I'm out of options. There's nothing that I can't take care of you. And it really challenges them because it's like, I want you to support me emotionally and in like other like ways besides money because I don't need that from you, you know? So it's interesting. Yeah, I've heard from men that can be intimidating, but women too. I'm always more surprised to hear it from other women. I don't know why. But I'm always like, I'm intimidating? I don't think so. But maybe.
Okay. Little context. I did date men in high school, right? And I remember my last boyfriend I had, he hated that I cussed. It was okay if his friends cussed, no problem. But it was just not okay for me. And I also remember there were aspects where I couldn't be too smart. Like, it was unattractive to be too smart, right? So I couldn't one-up him. There we go. I had to let him, it's that supportive role. I had to let him shine.
Yeah. And it's really nice when it's the opposite, when it's like, if I am smarter than a man, and I'll use Andrew as an example. I don't think I'm smarter than him. I think he's really smart. But if there's something that I know more about and he can hear me talk about it and he's learning it, he's like, oh, damn, I didn't think about it that way, or I didn't know it was like that, or okay, now I have new insight. Like, when a man can be confident to accept that part of you and be like impressed by it. Like, I'm not intimidated, I'm impressed. That is really who you want to date, like, in my opinion.
Hell
like,
yeah.
Someone who like kind of looks up to you in that way because I look up to you in other ways, right?
Yeah.
Like, it can be both. It doesn't have to be a one up, one down. But again, I think it's a toxic trait where it feels like it has to be one up, one down. Because again, women are taught men lead, women follow.
You have to limit yourself.
Yes,
like that's what it
to make this relationship work. Yeah.
And by the way, if you're smart at something, it's sexy. It's a sexy trait. You be smart at that thing. I'm sorry. I think we've kind of gone off the rails a little bit.
I think that's okay. I think that's okay. Yeah. I mean, I think all that kind of goes into a lot of the notes that I have, I mean, are kind of touching on this already. So, yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to toxic femininity, what I'm going to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like as a person?
What is like the image of someone?
Yes, there we go. Because we know the image of a man, right? Of a toxic masculinity. We see like this hyper macho type who just doesn't ever take any input from women, who has to do everything himself, I think is what we saw. It's like extreme independent. Cannot show any emotion. Like that is the image we get. So what would be the image that you get in your head when it comes to toxic femininity?
Toxic femininity, the image I get is an older woman who is very religious and is homophobic and also thinks sex is only for the purpose of making children and it shouldn't be done outside of that. Like, when I think of the self-righteous religious woman who like, this is what women should be doing in a godly home, and I'm going to judge you if you don't do that. That is what I think of when I think of toxic femininity. Okay.
I can see it. A lot of it seems to root in purity culture as well.
Yes.
I'm getting a lot of purity culture
vibes.
It
does, because it's very like, it removes identity and autonomy and replaces it with, this is the role of women in society. And if you don't fit in that, there's something wrong with you. Or I want nothing to do with you because you live an ungodly life, or, whatever. Or like someone who really views sexual promiscuity. That's also like toxic femininity to me, right? Like, if I ever hear anyone say, she's a slut, she's a whore, that is toxic femininity to me. Because what it's basically saying is, women should be pure. They should wait for the man that they love. They should wait until marriage. Sex is only for one person. All those views, I'm like, that's toxic.
Yeah, it's the whole thinking of your value. Again, women's value in the toxic femininity sphere is always your looks and your lack of sexual experience, or your if you have too much sexual experience, it's a bad thing. You should have none.
And it's also how you serve God and how you serve the man of the household.
Right. You got to be quiet.
Yes, that is what I like. That's like the perfect image. For me.
Okay, I can see that. I totally see that as well. Okay, so if we were speaking to our audience, which like I said, the 3 questions that we were is define toxic femininity, define feminism, and how it impacts future generations. So in your opinion, I mean, we know how the other end, the toxic masculine, can impact future generations and not letting men really explore and be them and be okay with their emotions. How do you say toxic femininity impacts future generations for women or people who identify as women?
Almost the same. Yeah. I think it keeps the cycle of abuse going, to be honest. Yeah. Because like just like when we were talking about toxic masculinity, and if we don't change that, we don't overcome that, there's like this cycle of abuse. And I don't just mean physical abuse. I mean like abuse emotionally, like abuse of self, like denial of self, right? Here's who I should be versus here's who I really am, but I'm going to go with what I should be doing. You put yourself in a very vulnerable place to be in an abusive environment, right? Because you don't have a voice. You don't get to speak up. You don't get to really be who you are. You don't get to explore. You're just faced with judgment and shame and criticism. And you're going to strive to fit in this box that you don't really want to fit in, but you kind of have to. And then it's just this environment of, it almost seems so depressing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a depressing life to live. And then you get into mental illness, and it's just, I feel like all that just continues.
It's so crazy the messages that women get versus men, because I feel like when we did, I apologize if I'm referencing toxic masculinity a lot, and it's more because this is, I mean, like you said, they're not apples to apples. You can't really compare them.
Yeah.
But in my logical mind, I want to see the patterns. And when it comes to toxic masculinity, what that boils down to is what makes it toxic is any trait that isn't part of the masculine sphere is considered weak, and men aren't supposed to be weak. And when I know you and I both share a interest in Brene Brown, right? And one thing that I always took away from one of her TED Talks was that for women, we have a bunch of pressures, and it comes from both the extreme feminism and the extreme femininity sphere, right?
Yeah.
Where not only do we have to be like these perfect women who support their husband, who, everything that we mentioned, right before, but then there's also that other pushback. If you're trying to be a good feminist, you have to be uber independent. You have to not, so it seems like we get all these conflicting.
Well, and like an example of that would be, there's like body positivity, which is a very feminist, it's like rooted in feminism, right? Like, your body is valid, you're beautiful, you can be happy at any weight, you don't deserve judgment depending on how you look. Like, there's all that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like body positivity. But then if you want to lose weight, you can also feel like, am I giving into this image? Is it a problem that I only feel confident when I'm thinner? It's such a hard, like, I know I
struggle with that.
Because I'm like, I go back and forth of like, I want to, like, body positivity and like celebrating fat people, and all of that is so important to me. But then I also have those days where I'm like, I don't like how I look, and I wish I was 20 pounds lighter. And then I go into a tailspin of, is that inherently a problematic view, that I want to lose weight, I only feel good when oh my God, you could just go, it gives us that pressure from both ends. And it's like, God, where is this rooted from? What's the motivation behind this? And how do I know, is this an active choice I'm making for me, or am I making it because I feel some societal pressure to be thinner? Or is it both? Or is it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, same
it's
thing
complicated.
Again. It's just, with all these different pressures, and like, I struggle with that same thing, where it's like, and me as someone who is attracted to women, I love bigger women too. Like, I love all the spectrum of bodies, tall, short, big, small, flat chested, big, but bring it on, please. But at the same time, I look in the mirror and I see the weight that I put on, and I am not happy, right, whatsoever. So it's just so hard to remember that, my body's attractive the way it is, and my wife loves me regardless, right? She tells me all the time. But also
But then when you don't believe it, you're just like, I don't believe I actually look good, though. I can't. It's just like someone can tell you, but you're like, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. It's so complicated. So the pressure from both ends. Yeah. Like, what do you do with that? I don't have a perfect answer to that. It's really hard.
Yeah. Doing this research, I didn't expect the amount of ethical dilemmas that I would be looking at, body positivity being one of them, because we all, in the feminism and also the sex positive movement, we are big on body positivity. But then there's also that line of, you don't want to promote unhealthy behaviors either, right? You don't want to promote things that could cause, obviously, health issues down the line. So, it's just that line that's also really difficult. Another dilemma that, if you don't mind us going through a couple of dilemmas, as someone who has tried her best to be an open, awesome, great feminist, right? But also has dated women and seen certain toxic behaviors when it comes to women just in general. How do you feel? I'm going to ask this question that seems to get a lot of flack about men hitting a woman back. Obviously, I'm going to just preface this as violence is never the answer ever, whatsoever. But we'll see it. If a guy hits a woman, obviously, red flags, alerts, big problems, big issues. If a woman hits a guy, it's never seen the same.
Which it should be seen the same.
Yeah.
To me, it is.
Okay.
100%.
I have to catch myself all the time with that too.
It's still an issue. We should not be hitting anyone.
Agreed.
We should not be hitting anyone. I mean, I've had like even at work, if that were to happen, you know, if a couple came in and it was like, yeah, I hit him because I was mad. No, we're not going to do that. That is not okay. We don't do that. No. And of course, it all depends on the context. I mean, if, you know, a man is backing a woman into a corner and he's being violent and intimidating and threatening, and her only way to get out of the house is to hit him in the face and run away, that obviously would be a much different context than we were in an argument. I was mad. I punched you in the face. Right? Yeah. Like very different context. How I feel about a man hitting a woman back, like if she hits him first and he hits her back. Again, I think it depends on the context. Like, I think if you get physically hit, your brain goes into overdrive. Like, you're probably emotionally flooded. And so you're reacting. I mean, I feel like we all would just react. And so if you react and you hit them back, I would understand it. I wouldn't promote it. I wouldn't say, hey, to get even, hit her back.
Agreed.
But I would understand if it was like, well, she hit me in the face, and so reaction, and I hit her back in the face. Like, I would, at the core, like, understand that, right? Now, I think that's where it would need to end. I would not, I'm like, from both ends, I'm like, you already did too much by hitting each other. It needs to stop.
Agreed.
But I kind of get it. If it's reactionary, I've never had anyone hit me before. But if someone did, I don't know what I would do.
See, and that's where my experience was, and that's why I bring this up, because I went from being the kind of awkward, feminine, a little bit masculine, androgynous type, right, to them being a very masculine woman, right, and who really wanted feminine women, right? So I chased feminine women. I dated a bunch of them. And I struggled with that question a lot. Because when it comes to the lesbian community, you know, a lot of lesbian couples do have that masculine, feminine energy that they like. But even in the lesbian community, violence is different between masculine to feminine versus feminine to masculine. So, okay, if I was dating men and a guy struck me for any reason, just out of the blue, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a big issue. Yeah. We're probably breaking up and probably never speaking to you again. I will label you now as abusive for the rest of your life. I have seen it, and I've also experienced it to where a woman got emotional and she slapped me. And I've also seen it. I've experienced it with friends too. I've seen that. And I didn't react because I'm in the masculine role. So I know just from old programming of growing up that I should not strike a woman for any reason.
But see, I think that messaging, and we hear all the time, men should never hit a woman. And men, and like, I think it's like a commendable thing. Like, a man would be like, I was taught never to hit a woman. I would never touch a woman. I get that. Like, that's right. I have also seen, like, even in clients, for example, they've been hit by women before, but they downplayed it. Yes. They were like, well, it wasn't really a big of a deal. And I'm like, but it would have been a huge deal if you did it. It's allowed to be a huge deal for you.
Or it would have been a huge deal if that person who hit you was a man.
Yeah, it would have. Oh, yeah. If it was a man who hit you, now we're in a fight. We're in a full on, like, I'm taking off my earrings, you know, kind of like fight.
That was good.
We're in a full-on fight. But it's like, when it's from a woman, it's seen as like, women are kind of weak. It wasn't that strong of a hit. It really wasn't a big deal. I think that should be a big deal.
Agreed, but it's so hard to break that programming. And it wasn't until my best friend witnessed it. She witnessed the girl slap me across the face, and I was just going to take it. I didn't think anything of it. We were both drinking. I was like, fine. And it was my best friend who pulled me aside and was like, that's not okay. She even pulled her aside and was like, if I ever see you, you know,
that's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I just, again, it's that programming.
But until someone points it out, you just kind of go along with that, like,
it's society's
the man or the masculine person never hits, and I haven't done that, so it's okay. And it's like, you don't deserve to have that happen back to you. Yeah. So it's, and again, it's almost like rooted in that toxic femininity. Like, women are kind of weak, and so if they do hit you, it's okay. You man up and just take it, because it's not that serious. It didn't hit you that hard. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? And so if I ever met anyone, whether it's a friend or a client or anyone who was doing that, there is clearly some emotional regulation that needs to happen, because you can be upset, you can be mad, you can be emotional, you can be whatever, but you do not need to be physically hurting people.
Agreed.
That's crazy.
Agreed. And then the other ethical dilemmas I see when it comes to men and women, where what we're talking about right now, I feel like, is women privilege, which a lot of people feel like women privilege doesn't exist. And part of my feminine beliefs also kind of subscribe to that thinking that women privilege didn't exist, right? There's no such thing. And in an overall umbrella, I do kind of believe that inherently men do have this privilege that we just don't have. But I also see there is such thing as women privilege, and the violence being one thing. We're allowed to be violent, and it's not seen as any issue. Sometimes it works to our not to our benefit, right? Because men think they can overpower us no matter what. But there's also the woman privilege I see a lot is when it comes to parental rights. Right? To where we just automatically, doesn't matter if the woman is a piece of shit, we just automatically inherently think that, you know, she should get the rights to be the parent, right? Versus,
and it's such a, like, I get using the word privilege because that's kind of what it, like, when you look at it, it looks like privilege, but it's the same as, like, when men have privilege, it's all in this society, it's all in this structure that benefits no one. Like, big picture, right?
Okay.
Like, women might have more rights to their children because they're seen as more nurturing and, like, whatever. We know that's not always true.
Yeah.
But those same things that can, like, privilege a mom who doesn't deserve her kids but gets her kids anyways, those same traits puts another woman under oppression. You get what I mean? Like, like we're in this system where it's like, oh, well, women have, I'm not saying this about you, but, like, there's some guy who's mad at us talking about toxic masculinity is like, well, women get all kinds of stuff all the time. And I'm like, they do in some arenas, but in other arenas, those very same things put them under your thumb and keep them down. You get what I mean? Like, it's like the system we're in, it doesn't really work for everybody. It's so complicated, right? But that's a really good example. I mean, my brother is going through that.
Oh yeah,
the custody battle, and he's a great dad, and his daughter's mom has a lot of problems, and he's just been in this constant battle, even though his daughter has primarily been only in his life. Like, he already is primarily taking care of her, and the courts still want to give pushback of, like, what about the mom? It's like, but the mom's not there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she's not even literally there, and she still has some kind of say in all this. It's just very interesting, isn't it? Oh, and I love the different perspectives, or just the, you know, taking these questions and kind of trying to, you know, hit them with a baseball bat to see if, you know, they work or not. Okay, so in your practice, do you ever find yourself advocating for, like, a man's rights or for the men? Like, do you ever see toxic femininity? Yeah, all the time. An example would be when a male partner does start to open up and it's met with judgment.
Oh, okay.
That happens quite a bit. Like, their female partner will kind of judge it or shoot it down or not really listen. And there's a little bit of toxicity in there, right? And I think it's because they're not used to it. Couples can easily have this dynamic where the man plays his role, the woman plays her role. We're comfortable in that, and then it stops working, right? They're coming to therapy for a reason. Once the male partner starts opening up and it makes the female partner uncomfortable, they can be looked at as like, well, now you're the one being too emotional. And I'm like, well, wait, that's not fair. Yeah. Because that's the whole reason we're here. Yeah. The whole reason we're here is to open up. Y'all are both emotional, aren't you? But you're allowed to be. So it's even these little shifts that they're having to face. Like, women are not the only ones who are allowed to be emotional. Mm-hmm. Men are just as emotional. They just maybe don't know how to express it. And so once they start doing that, it can create a lot of shakeup in the system that they've created.
So the other question I have, which I'm sure comes up in your practice every once in a while, when it comes to the sexual assault, that was also one of the things that I saw as a rebuttal for the equality movement compared with feminism. Do you ever see that? Like, should a woman who is claiming sexual assault be believed at all costs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think the the percentage of false reports is like less than 1%. Like the percentage is so small. It's smaller than you think. People like to say, well, look at all these reports. I'm like, yeah, but in the grand scheme of the thousands, millions of reports, there's literally, I think it's like less than 1% are false reports.
Okay.
And a lot of them are quickly found out to be lies. Like, I think it's I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I don't want to invalidate a man who has been unjustly convicted, right, of a sexual assault. But the instance of that is so, so, so rare. Meanwhile, the opposite, where a woman is not believed, is so common.
That's true.
That is what happens all the time. All the time. And then the argument is like, well, where's the proof? And it's like, the issue with these kind of crimes is that there rarely is proof. Unless there's a record of it happening. There's not going to be any proof. It's too much of a burden to put on the victim. And so, like, you know, when people say like, well, we should question them and we should, you know, I got to see some evidence. What evidence? Where are you going to get that? You're not going to get it in most cases unless there's like a video of it, unless someone was there and saw it.
That's true.
Unless you have like a witness who saw it. And then even when like, if someone does get a sexual assault examination afterwards, let's say they do find semen and it matches the person who said assaulted you. All they have to say is like, well, it was consensual sex. I mean, it's so hard to prove that. Do I think we should believe all women when they come and say it? Yes, I do every single time.
Okay.
And until some evidence comes up. Now, when there's evidence coming up that like disproves it, an example would be like, Friday night I was, you know, raped by so-and-so, and then you find out that person wasn't even in town. Like, there might be signs where it's like, okay, obviously that's not the truth. Unless I see that, I have no reason to not believe them, because the odds are 99% of the time they're telling the truth.
Okay. Is that gendered in your opinion? Like, if it was a man who was saying he was sexually assaulted, would you give the same grace?
Totally.
Or? Okay. So it's really just about victims.
It's really just about victims. Man, woman, non-binary person, anyone. I'm going to believe you.
And just for our audience, the people especially who are going to push back and say that men can't be sexually assaulted, what do you say to
They can, and they are more than they report. It's like women are not really strong enough to overtake a man, so it couldn't happen. That's like the myth.
Mm-hmm. Or he should. I mean, what do you mean he didn't know he was sexually assaulted? He should have wanted it. I would have wanted it.
I know.
Yeah,
or, well, he got hard, so that must mean that he desired it. And it's like, that's not true. That's a bodily reaction. That doesn't mean mentally he wanted to do it. So yeah, if a man ever says that, I believe them every time.
Okay. So yeah, again, it's not really gendered. It's more of a, you believe the victim at all costs.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the other one is, do you believe that paternity leave should be the same as maternity leave, or should we grant the woman more? Do you think that should also be part of the feminist movement? We should fight for equality for both of those.
Equality for both.
I agree with that too.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And maternity leave and paternity leave should be paid.
Girl, let's not even talk about that. Yeah.
It's not paid.
I'm curious to see how my company handles that if my wife gets pregnant this year, because I don't know if I would qualify for maternity leave. Or
I would hope that you would,
paternity leave.
You would be a mom.
I'm a mother, right? But I'm not having the kid. So yeah, again, I think
I think that's where I have the issue is like, why is it only for the person who had the kid? Because I get to a point, if you're the one that gave birth, you have a physical recovery as well as taking care of a child. But the other parent is still going through a lot too, and their whole life has changed, and they probably want to spend time with their kid, and they want to help the other parent who's physically healing. And I mean, I think you should have time for that. Andrew's company, they do pay for paternity leave.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he has 3 months of paid leave.
That's badass.
Yeah. So like, I think that's great. Like, I think every company should be doing that.
Hell yeah. Okay. And then the other one, this might get a little spicy. Should men be allowed a say when it comes to reproductive rights? So we're talking about equality, right? And that's feminism. But again, I feel I have
that's the part where I don't know if you can ever get full equality, because when it comes to reproduction, women are the only ones who experience it.
Exactly.
And it's not like women chose that. It's not like I'm taking this and you don't get any of that. Literally, that's just biologically how it is. There is no way around that. So do I think that they should have a say? No.
I agree.
Not really.
I know, and I'm feminist and I'm pro equality for all men and women, but I'm at the same. You guys aren't the one who have to carry it for 9 months.
And there's nothing that we can do about that.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that it's out of our control. It's not like I can say, "Hey, you take this half of pregnancy, and I'll take this half," and then we'll both have a say, and then we'll negotiate. There quite literally is no way to negotiate there. Yeah. Women are the only ones who go through it. So yeah, I don't really particularly care about a man's opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, those are my ethical dilemmas as far as like whenever I saw the feminist movement and I see the pushback that we get, a lot of time it's these questions that kind of get brought up as far as like, well, you guys don't believe in equality, really. You just want to have your cake and eat it too. So I wanted us to kind of cover them a little bit. But just for context, I know we're getting to the end of the episode, but I just wanted to, we went through how you've seen toxic femininity in your life, but when I think of toxic femininity, it brings me back to this one era, a couple months of my life, and it was when I worked at a cabaret for a little bit. So I bartended at a cabaret for nights, and walking into that building, I noticed a change in everybody, like in literally every single person who goes into that. And obviously it's a cabaret, so it's a gentleman's club. So it's tailored to men, right? They have the nicer restrooms. We think about what men want as far as the business and what, so we tailor to them because it's their club, which makes sense. But I feel like that was the industry where I saw toxic femininity more than I've ever seen ever in my life. And a lot of it, when you were talking about competition and how we will sabotage another woman in order to get it. I mean, that's exactly what I saw in the cabaret all day. So I would go in, I would clock in for my shift. And then, I'm pouring them drinks. And so I would speak to the girls, but I would also speak to the Johns. That's what they call them. The girls, John. They're not women either. They're called girls, but girls in the Johns. And their mindsets were completely different. And the difference in the mindset was, so men would go in there thinking, what is the closest I can get to having this person sleep with me without having to pay them. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's their mindset. And women are like, how much money can I extract from this John without having him touch me? Yeah. Right? So it's that battle that they have in the cabaret. And, obviously it depends on, which John you find. But I would see women using their feminine wiles to gain things out of men, to like take advantage of men. Yeah. Right? And I saw that. A lot in the cabaret, where they would pick the sad guy who they thought had like, the black MasterCard in his pocket, right? And they would make him think that they were completely into him. They would lead him on. I mean, in all fairness, this is their job. But they would lead him on. They would tell him how much they, want him, how they want to meet with him afterwards. He would spend all this money. He would go to the ATM. He would pull extra money out because he's getting this attention. And then at the end of the night, she gone. Like, well, that's your fault for, for coming in here, right? And I would see it and it never felt right to me. Yeah. Right? Same thing with, the men who, there are obviously predators who go to the strip club as well, who, just want to go there, try to get as close to raping a girl without, having to come out of pocket, which is also really fucking gross. But I would see the worst parts about men and women working there. And it did suck. But yeah, so that's where it was hard for me as a feminist person who, I'm all about, girl, you got them assets, you want to flaunt them. I'm all about, you get up on that pole. That's hard to do. They can do some impressive stuff with their bodies. But I would also see the horrible portion of it too, where it was just like.
And that goes back to where like toxicity is not always gender. Like I think in general, taking advantage of someone is a toxic trait. Yeah. It is unfortunate to see, even if that's. And if someone were to say, like, well, that's my job, why do you want that job?
And they're using their femininity. That's where I would see it. Yeah. You're using your femininity. in order to take advantage of something. Just same thing with the masculinity. You're using your the fact that you might be stronger or whatever, you know, to put other people down, right? It's the same thing, just in a different. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, yeah. Makes a lot of sense. This was a good topic.
Yeah, this was kind of off the rails a little bit. There was like not much structure, but I enjoyed it. It was very conversational.
It was good. There's a lot that goes into this. Yeah, everyone who's listening, let us know what you thought of this, and hopefully we challenge your view on what toxic femininity is, or maybe it's not what you expected. But let us know in the comments what you think and what other topics you'd like to hear. We are also open to listener support. And so if you want to keep hearing content from us and help us continue to grow and expand our production and provide you with quality content, you can support us for as little as $1 a month. And we have the link for that in our YouTube page, as well as anywhere you listen to your podcast. You can see the support link there. And just remember to like, subscribe, and follow.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time for the next episode. So again, we are Sex Positivity Unfiltered, and remember to stay curious and fuck politeness.